I was asked to speak on the topic, Stuff Happens, Stories of Change, Transition, and Transformation. Well, as most of you know, I'm Jamaican. And when I think of stuff happening, combined with change, transition, and transformation, I can't help but go back to a time when I was a little 11-year-old girl in Jamaica and sat for my common entrance examination. For those of you not familiar with the British education system, the common entrance examination is a standardized examination which children sit at ages 11 or 12, and it gives you an opportunity, if you pass, to go to one of the nation's elite high schools. If you score really, really well, then you get an opportunity to go to the elite high school of your choosing. But if you fail, then you are sent to one of the low-performing, lower standard, third-rate high schools. And for a popular student whose parents, teachers, and friends thought would have passed with extremely high scores, going to a third-rate high school because of failure of the common entrance is a fate worse than death. Well, that's what happened to me. And you have to understand, this is not some notice that comes in your inbox email saying that you failed. This is a public notification for students who pass. In the Daily Gleaner, the newspaper, your name appears, and the elite high school to which you will attend appears next to your name. So if you get up early on the morning that you know the common entrance will be announced, and you run for the paper very quickly and you begin to look for your name. And if you do not see your name listed in the newspaper, then you and the whole world knows you failed the common entrance. And that's what happened to me at age 11. And so teachers who were really surprised, one teacher in particular, Mrs. Escoffrey, says, "Jean Rattigan, I cannot believe you failed the common entrance. You're going to end up at Vauxhall." That's a third grade high school. And "end up" was the phraseology, as if Vauxhall was some kind of prison for delinquent children. But I ended up at Vauxhall. Now, honestly, the exam results, they're published in June, and you start at Vauxhall in September. And I really couldn't believe that one little girl could have so much tears. I am convinced I cried day and night every day from the examination was announced until I showed up at Vauxhall in September in my green and white pajama button uniform. Not the beautiful navy blue tunic and French beret and Peter Pan color of the Convent of Mercy Academy for Girls Alpha I had hoped to be wearing. So my mother braided my hair in 3 fat dookie braids with pretty green and white polka dot ribbons, but nothing she could do could make me feel hopeful. I was at Vauxhall, morose and beaten at 12. All my friends had gone off to the elite high schools of their choosing. And I was at Vauxhall with the ruffians and the dunce cap kids. But the first semester arrived at Vauxhall, something really interesting happened. So I was sad, didn't want to hang out with the girls, so I played with the boys. And on the playground, of all places, I was playing a game we called Stuck in the Mud with a group of boys. And I was expounding about what the rules for the games are. And unbeknownst to me, as I was telling the boys what they needed to do, and of course, these are rules you simply make up as you go along. There was a teacher, Mrs. Mabel Livingston, who was listening to me expound to the group of boys. And after the bell rang and I went back to my class, this lady found me in my home economics class. Believe it or not, there was such a course. She asked my home economics teacher if she could excuse me because she needed to talk to me. Of course, I had no idea what I did. So the lady took me outside and she said, in that crisp British West Indian way, Jamaican elite talk, and she said, "Little girl, what is your name?" And of course I tell her. And she said, "Are you aware that you have been given a most amazing gift in that voice of yours?" Of course, I have no idea what she's talking about. She must have realized the panic on my face. And she said, "Do you like poetry?" And I said, "Have you ever considered," she said, "entering the Speech and Drama Festival?" And I said, and she said, "Well, I am taking you under my wings because you have been given a gift which you must not waste." And I said, and I ended up in Mrs. Mabel Livingston's drama class. For 2.5 years, under Mrs. Livingston's tutelage, first of all, she gave me a little brown hardcover book, The Handbook of Diction and Elocution. I still have it. Mrs. Livingston introduced me to an array of writers and poets and playwrights, from Shakespeare to Somerset Maugham, from Redcom to Claude McKay. Under Mrs. Livingston's tutelage, I ended up winning first place in several speech and drama festivals, was tapped to be the student welcomer to dignitaries who came to the island, was asked to perform at the Prime Minister's reception, and on and on and on. And here's the kicker. By the time I turned 14, I took the aptly named second chance exam and scored off the charts and ended up in my navy blue tunic and French beret at the Convent of Mercy Academy for Girls, Alpha. So stuff happens. And I learned very, very, very early in life that stuff happens. But I also learned that the stuff happening is a temporary bit. The transformation that can follow stuff happening, now that's the part that stays with you and shapes who and what you become. But it requires that someone is willing to stop, to look, to listen, and sometimes to go in search of another. In addition to developing a lifelong love of reading and writing poetry, and reciting poetry. I also write poetry and publish on my own. And this morning, accompanied by Gerald, I will perform for you two of the poems I most recently wrote. One I was asked to write for the performance of the slave ship Amistad, which aimed to give a description, a true depiction of the slave ship. And the other I call Reconciling Jesus. Gerald?
Lord, how come we here? Lord, how come we here? Lord, how come we here? I wish I never was born. There ain't no freedom here, Lord. There ain't no freedom here. There ain't no freedom here, Lord. I wish I never was born. They treat me so mean, Lord. They treat me so mean, Lord. They treat me so mean, Lord. I wish I never was born.
12 million souls forced from their shores, stuffed into holes and arranged like planks, chained and naked, weeping by the banks, blood, sweat, and fear oozing from their pores. To a distant land they'll eventually be taken, but for now they're lodged in halls hot and stink. If the gods are merciful, the monstrosity will sink. Like Jesus on the cross, they're totally forsaken. The horrific crossing is condemned by no one. The only lament is for more ships and faster. These in the hull must serve the master. Triangular trade waits back-breaking work to be done. Brutal inhumanity, the kind so unspeakable. Humiliated and shackled in filth they remained. Raped, rejected, scorned, completely disdained. Of such cruelty they couldn't think man capable. The arrival, no better than the journey across. Stripped, tarred and oiled to fetch the highest price. Important to look healthy, to plant cotton and rice, and the godless, greedy plantation boss. How long could depraved men work as such evil crew, forcing 10 million souls like pigs to the auction, and 2 million more to the bottom of the ocean? Years. A shocking 352.
Hold on just a little while longer. Hold on just a little while longer. Hold on just a little while longer.
reconciling Jesus. The Jesus I'm known looks nothing like the Jesus I'm shown. The Jesus I've known is a marginalized racial minority, radical activist, compassionate, lightning rod, son of God. The Jesus I'm shown is a mainstreamed, blue-eyed, blonde Caucasian, calm, distant, has no worry, enshrined in glory. I'm in a bit of a hurry to tell the story of the Jesus I've known, not the Jesus I'm shown. Racial profiling is not a new case. Herod did it to Jesus when boys of his race were profiled and slaughtered, exactly what the ruler had ordered. Terror and fear Jesus fully understands. Sheltered by his mother's hands, the young Jesus was forced to run and to hide in the dead of night with Joseph by his side. He has neither privilege nor high-powered connection. Came the oft-had question, is that not Jesus, the carpenter's son? He experiences hunger, sadness, and despair, and seeing the multitude shows compassion and care. The Jesus I've known has had to tell that persistent enemy to go to hell. Not a place designed for human, get thee hence, Satan. To the rich, who view their excess with a laugh and a giggle, Jesus warns, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven, a warning they should heed exactly as given. Jesus I've known seems not to worry or fret about mixing with the lame or the desperate, or the diseased, the outcast, and the sick, not even the demon-possessed and the lunatic. He gets angry, stands up, fights, and declares, my temple will be called a house of prayers, but you have made it into a den of thieves. Then, with whip in hand, rolls up his sleeves. He cares for everyone, Jew, Gentile, and Greek, and for the truly sad, the gentle, and the meek, it's on them he calls a blessing and pointedly said, thou shalt inherit the earth and be comforted. So it is not unexpected. Jesus ensures the socially rejected will be more than all right. Zacchaeus, I'm coming to your house tonight. To the peacemakers, not the warriors, Jesus gave the great nod. They, he reminds, are the children of God. He speaks truth to power, quite bold and quite free. Thou couldst have no power over me unless it be given thee. The Jesus I've known speaks to the reality of the prevalence of poverty. The poor will be with you, he said, making sure we know to share our daily bread. The Jesus I've known cares deeply for women. Weep not for me, but for your children. And to the woman he loves most, woman, behold thy son, before he gave up the ghost. And with no intent we should languish on the shelf, he promises, I will come again and receive you unto myself, saying for sure there is a place to go, that where he is, we will be also. The Jesus I've known looks nothing like the Jesus I'm shown. So now you get a little insight into why I do the work I do. I know stuff happens. Stuff happens to many of our families. It seems more so today than ever before, especially to our immigrant families and our families who are poor. But I also know the first-hand power of transition and transformation that can follow when stuff happens. But first, someone must engage. Someone must take the time to stop, to look, to listen, to actually see the other, and to act. I know this because the Jesus I've known himself set the stage for us to do just this, and indeed left a command to do just this. And behold, a certain lawyer stood up and tempted him, saying, "Master, what should I do to inherit eternal life?" And he answering said, "What is written in the law? How readest thou?" And he answering said, "Thou shalt love the Lord with all thy God, thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, with all thy strength, and with all thy mind, and thy neighbor as thyself." And Jesus said, "Thou hast answered right. This do, and thou shalt live." But he, willing to justify himself, said unto Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" And Jesus said, "A certain man went down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell among thieves, which stripped him of his raiments and wounded him and departed, leaving him half dead. By chance there came a certain priest that way, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. Likewise a Levi, as he journeyed, came and looked upon him and passed by on the other side. But a certain Samaritan, as he journeyed, came where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion on him, and went to him, and bound up his wounds, pouring in oil and wine, and sat him on his own beast, and brought him to an inn, and took care of him. And on the morrow when he departed, he gave the innkeeper 2 pence, and said, Take care of him, and whatsoever more thou spendest, when I come again, I will repay thee. Then said Jesus unto him, Which of these 3 thinkest thou was neighbor unto him that fell among thieves? And he, answering, said, He that showed mercy on him. Then said Jesus unto him, Go, and do thou likewise.
If I can help somebody as I pass along, if I can help somebody with a word or song, if I can show somebody how they're traveling wrong, then my living shall not be in vain. Then my living shall not be in vain. Then my living shall not be in vain.
And Mrs. Livingston remains my friend to this day, and at 85, still with that vibrant, crisp British West Indian way of speaking, remains as committed as ever as she now works with the family and children in the Jamaica Village Project. Thank you.